This episode is brought to you by Avalanche, the layer 1 that is blazingly fast, low cost, and eco-friendly. You'll hear more about Avalanche later in the show. All right, everybody, back with another weekly roundup. We are missing Santiago today as he is in traveling in another continent with some pretty subpar Wi-Fi, but we have three folks subbing in for Santiago. Number one, we've got the Matt Levine of crypto. We've got Byron subbing in, newsletter writer from Blockworks, self-declared Matt Levine of crypto.
Self-declared.
We've got Mr. Mike Ippolito.
Others have declared it. Others have declared it.
And then we also have a special guest, Matt Hepler, VP at Arca. Matt, welcome to the show. And Byron and Mike, but you guys don't get your own specific shout out. Matt, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, of course. Very excited to talk Terra and Anchor with you. So Matt, I think it'd be a little bit helpful. Can you just give folks a very quick background on yourself and just like, why did we bring you to the table? And then we're going to jump into obviously Anchor and what's going on with just the different proposals that you guys are running by the community.
Yeah, of course. So, most of my career I spent on the public equity side and was really focused on a strategy where, we would take large positions in public companies and, engage management teams and boards and use governance as a way to, effectuate change that would be, positive for shareholders, for the business, sustainability, and for governance. And, that process is very well defined in equities, with annual meetings and voting and a lot of infrastructure around that process. And we are still in the very early stages of governance in digital assets. And I think, while completely different asset classes, there's a lot of, concepts that can be applied from, traditional finance to digital assets.
There are a couple of big things that we want to cover today. One is just Anchor, right? And how is Anchor's APY actually still staying kind of at around 19%, while some of these other stable yields are down to like 2 to 5%. The other is Terra right now is, I'm not sure if you want to opine on this, but Terra, I know you guys are very interested in that ecosystem. Everything else is down like 7 to 15%. Terra's up 12%. And then the last thing is just some of your proposals that you guys have presented. Before we jump into that though, I want to get your take on governance in equities versus governance in crypto, and what are the similarities and what are the differences there?
Yeah, I think the similarities are, if you approach a situation with really good facts, present them broadly, like we've done with Anchor, usually if people are honest and smart, we can get to the same answer because everybody's essentially aligned. I think the difference is, in equities, there are just very defined structures of how to, effectuate change with a company. The board, there's a board group, there's a management team, they have consultants, they're very well resourced with a lot of employees. And so really most of the change is either facilitated through, the board and the management team. And every year there's an election for directors that are supposed to be a proxy for shareholders. So they essentially represent shareholders' best interests. And, that cadence is very defined on an annual basis when you can actually, make changes and proposals and nominate directors. In digital assets, the core ethos is complete decentralization. So the benefit is you're able to, put something on a forum, try to develop consensus and put something to a vote, and the turnaround time is very quick. It could be a week, and you're actually making a change to the business versus like a year timeline. Now, the downside is voter participation is very low. Typically, there's a 10% turnout for digital assets on a vote, where you get 90% in equities. So consensus building is difficult, and there's just not a very steady cadence of proposals. And when they're submitted, so you could have 1,000 different proposals, but it's very difficult for token holders to sift through what are real, what are credible, and which ones are not. So I think there's a big opportunity for thought leadership in the space, and that's why we think that there's a big opportunity to Anchor.
Is there, last question on this, and then we can jump into anchors. In traditional equities, you said 90%. Is that a delegation of votes, or is that someone actually one person vote? Is that 90% of the equity holders are actually voting?
Yeah. So if you look at equities, 80% are usually owned by institutions, large funds, including, the BlackRock, State Streets, Fidelities of the world, traditional institutional, like hedge funds and long only funds. And then 20% is, retail investors. And what you find is all of the larger funds have a very robust governance process where they actually have to vote for their clients. It's, it's their fiduciary duty to vote. So they go through all the proposals. There's a specific time in the year, usually in May, when they review everything. On the retail side, usually it's split, 50% of people vote, 50% don't. So you get a much higher turnout just because there's much more fund exposure that has a process to do this. In digital assets, you obviously have some funds. You have a lot of VC exposure where VC funds don't like taking a side, on proposals. So yeah, that's kind of why the turnout's typically a lot lower.
Yeah, got it. Let's jump into Anchor, unless Byron or Mike wants to jump in with any other of that fun stuff. But so for those who don't know, and Matt, I'm going to ask you to actually give us a much better definition than this, but the very high level on Anchor is really the backbone of the Terra ecosystem. It's got, I don't know, maybe I think it's around 13 billion in TVL today. About 60% of the total TVL on Terra is coming from Anchor right now. And it's really been instrumental to bootstrapping the UST's demand, right? And it's done that in a really simple way, which is by paying these like 15 to 20% APYs on UST deposits. It's similar to an Aave compound, but different. It's different from these like money market protocols with their variable deposit and borrow rates that are based on market supply and demand. And at its heart, Anchor is really a savings protocol, whereas Aave and compound are more like money markets. And the difference, we can get into the differences later, but I think, Matt, I think it'd be helpful to just get your understanding and your take on why Anchor is so crucial to the Terra ecosystem and like really what is Anchor in your view? And then we can jump into some of the fun stuff.
Yeah, well, I think, if you look at just Terra and the ecosystem in general, it's the second largest, platform on DeFi. And, it has 17 apps, businesses running on it versus Ethereum that has, over 250. So adoption is very critical for Terra and the entire ecosystem. Adoption goes up. They're allowed to mint more UST and burn more Luna. And, at the current rate, they're burning 1.5 million Luna per day. So if you get to 50 billion by the end of the year, you're almost out of Luna. But yeah, as you mentioned, Anchor is a very simple business model. It's very attractive and easy to use for depositors. And it gets people familiar with using stable coins. If you compare UST, which is an algorithmic stable coin, to UST or USDC, it's much more censorship resistant, it's capital efficient, and decentralized. And so it's really creating, it's a learning experience for users. I deposit my, 100 grand of UST and I get, 20% back. It's also really good for, small, medium-sized businesses. So yeah, I think right now it was very adoption focused, very kind of subsidy oriented. And you have this imbalance now where you've got, 9 billion of deposits, but you only have a borrow of 3 billion. And that's really where you make your money as a, lending and deposit platform. So yeah, I think over time as they're adding new collateral assets on the platform. They currently have Luna and ETH, but they're adding, Avalanche and Atom. And as they take in more collateral on the borrow side, they're able to stake those assets and earn a return, which should, eventually offset the yield on the deposit side. But right now there's, as you mentioned, there's a big imbalance.
So Matt, you I think there are a couple different, just a couple different takeaways from what you just said. I mean,
in order for Anchor to continue to be successful, there are two different sets of constituents that need to get served, right? There are the people that are depositing and getting that 19% yield, which may or may not be sustainable. And then there are people that are actually borrowing from the protocol, right? And one of the things, the way Anchor tries to make it attractive, right, to borrow, is to actually subsidize with the Anchor token, right, which may or may not be sustainable. But I think one of the big questions I know that when you and I last chatted is that value is not properly accruing back to Anchor token holders, right? So this is all based on the Terra ecosystem, and Luna is kind of the the backbone of that. But ultimately, Terra is they're separate Terra stakeholders in their own right, and because of the current structure, value is not accruing properly back to a protocol that has, like Jason said, 13 billion in TVL. So can you just walk us through why you think that is, and then maybe if we get into the specifics of the proposal that you put forward as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The short answer is that it's not sustainable. The 20% was a number that was actually fixed when the business was launched, and has really been a bootstrapping mechanism for demand. If you actually look in the Anchor white paper, they actually have what's called the Anchor rate, and that was supposed to be sort of a normalized rate for DeFi that would essentially take into account the earnings that you're getting on the staked assets, which today is kind of 10% or lower. So if you just do the combination, if you do the comparison, 10% versus 20%, we've got a big delta here. So we think one of the just one more comment before getting to the proposal. We feel like there's a pretty easy fix for this. The problem is there's a very concentrated amount of depositors that are taking a larger percentage of the yield rewards versus the small and medium-sized power users and companies. So that's kind of that kind of tees up the conversation about the proposal. We think that the sustainability issues can be fixed.
So you said that you mentioned bootstrapping. So one of my questions is why is the Terra ecosystem still in bootstrapping mode? Luna's got a $30 billion market cap. TFL's got $30 billion of Luna in reserve. Why are they still bootstrapping?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think this is just kind of this hasn't really been addressed, and it hasn't been catalyzed by anyone in governance. I think it's even more important as they just received a $450 million injection of UST to the reserve. They previously had a $500 million injection. So these are occurring very frequently, and they're burning rewards at a very high rate. And so I think it's just a case of this is where it was when they launched, and they've got an incredible scale. Like you said, the TVL is grown dramatically, and is going to continue to grow. So we really believe that this can be run more autonomously, particularly as they add more collateral to the platform.
Does the system still need that 19.5% yield though? Could the system not be fine on a 10% yield or whatever would be more sustainable?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we've done one of the nice things, just being a member of Arca, we've got a lot of resources to do a lot of deep research, and the last thing we want to do is short circuit adoption as we're on the logarithmic scale of growth. And we were very careful about setting some of these thresholds for rewards. We think the user that has $100,000 of deposits, that's a very reasonable level for incentivizing people to come on the platform, and represents not as high of the rewards that are moving to larger institutions that are using this for a yield strategy. And then you've got very good power users and ambassadors for the product in kind of the $100,000 to $500,000 range. And we think those can come down. But certainly the larger institutions that are using this for more of a yield strategy, we don't think that it really has much impact on adoption. So that's why we've tiered this proposal appropriately.
So Matt, to just tee everything up here, two big problems. We've got some amount of unsustainability on the business model because we're not able to add demand for borrow and demand for earn at the same time. And also, value is not accruing back to Anchor token holders, right? I think Anchor is like flat to down since it's since its launch, right? And it's accumulated 13 billion in TVL. Doesn't really seem just. Multiple different proposals out there right now to change. Like you guys proposed something with Polychain. There's a proposal out there from a group called Retrograde. I'm pretty sure there's another proposal as well that is now live, which is kind of based on the yield reserve. Can you just kind of give us a summary of your proposal, some of the other ones that's out there, and then how should people be assessing trade-offs of the various proposals?
Yeah, no, thanks. I think the first thing is, none of these proposals are mutually exclusive. It's not kind of one or the other. We chose to focus on the issue that was most broadly recognized as not being sustainable going forward, also being the one that's going to create the most value for ANC token holders, and something that was also very simple, where it wouldn't require a lot of additional resources to implement, and is also the most pressing issue, given that we've just got $450 million of UST that's on a pretty high burn rate. So we wanted to really focus on this issue. In terms of the other proposals, there was a VGov proposal from Retrograde. Retrograde is launching their own protocol to really focus on Terra and centralizing governance. I think we understand the concept relative to Curve and this popularity. In general, we think that having to lock up tokens for votes over a 4-year period doesn't make sense. That's more of a private equity like VC timeline in terms of investor timeline versus a public digital asset. I think while we recognize that does create some demand, we think from a sustainability standpoint, the burn on the reserves is more critical. And then, I think there was one other proposal that tried to manage rewards based on like volatility of the reserve and depletion. I think the issue there is it really doesn't address this, gaming of the system from large depositors, which is what we're trying to focus on. And also, we want to give better benefits to the small and mid-sized.
You're really focusing on two things here. One is the burn of the reserve, and then two is focusing on making it so that that everyone's benefiting from the system. And by the burn of the reserve, this is the small brain question here. I just want to make sure I fully understand it, which is if you deposit like 100 Luna, the depositors are getting, let's say, $8 from the staking yield, maybe 2 to 3 from the borrow interest, and then that shortfall of the 10 or $11 right now is made up from the yield reserve. Just so I'm fully on. Okay.
Yes. So, ideally over time, we think this proposal, if you get to kind of a 15% zone blended with large and small users, that saves them $400 to $500 billion, on run rate depletion, which is huge. And so, I think as you layer on more protocols in terms of collateral, you're going to get more income. So you've kind of decreased expense on one side, and then over time, hopefully, interest on the other side of the business increases, and ultimately they become a break-even, business over time. And we think like at that point, they're going to really re-rate on a multiple basis. And that's why we think the kind of price appreciation over the last 30 to 45 days has been so robust relative to anything else, is because people have built in an expectation that something's going to get done on the governance side. And there's been a lot of attention drawn to this, which is great. Now we just have to follow through with doing something that's going to be accretive and value driven for ANC holders.
Is that the right way to think about it, though? Because it is a governance token, right? So is it right to think that value should accrue to a governance token, or should the value be accruing to the protocol, in which case the best proposal is whatever is best for the protocol rather than the token price?
Well, first, it benefits all token holders and not just the governance holders, which are staking. You have to stake to vote here. So all tokens will, appreciate. And ultimately, if you're proposing something that's good for the business, it's good for sustainability, it's good for the long-term success of the platform. It also helps Terra because they don't have to inject as much capital going forward. And so we've been very cautious and very diligent about what can be done, here, what changes can be made. We've engaged, world best-in-class consultants and developers and making sure that this can be implemented. So yeah, we've given a lot of thought, and we think the whole system's going to be better after this is implemented.
I've got one more question for you here. I know one of the objectives, right, of Terra is to try to expand, or for UST is to try to expand onto other protocols in general. Can you talk to me about how just complicating the yield structure, right, in Anchor could actually, like, the impact on like AUST, right, and the ability to kind of spread like UST across different protocols? Like, what are some of the downsides, I suppose, of
Yeah, I think obviously some of those concerns have been raised, and we don't want to impede the adoption of UST to other platforms, because we think that's obviously critical. We've obviously taken account a lot of the impact to mirror, which we also want to be very careful of, and we've basically validated from this is coming from some of the largest token holders that have been with the business since it was launched, and we've consulted experts, we've consulted token holders, developers, and their feedback was this can be done, has to be done carefully, and there probably needs to be some resource focus on this, but it's not going to be a detriment to the adoption of UST or the protocol.
I wondered, one of the great things about DeFi is that generally the little guy can game the system just as well as the big guy, right? So you're differentiating between large depositors and small depositors, but is it not the case that small depositors are, playing the game just the same way as the whales are?
Yeah, I think on the smaller side, if someone wants to create 5 wallets at $100,000 a piece, yeah, so be it. I mean, it's actually optically going to look great in terms of adoption. So we recognize that there is going to be some gaming of the system at the margin, but this is meant to be a first step. If we, it can always be revised, it can always be tweaked, but we think this is a step in the right direction. It's conservative. We made it that way. We definitely want to preserve the adoption trend going forward. If that means some people game the system on the margin, then that's okay. But we're really trying to focus on the larger institutions that they would have to take on a considerable amount of custodian risk and operational costs to actually manage 100 wallets for a $50 million deposit in the system.
Why not just ANC pays people to borrow, right? Like, why not just stop paying people to borrow, or why not just cut the rate to a sustainable rate for everyone rather than tier it?
Yeah, I think if you think about how the income statement works or how profit is being generated, it's the lending business is where you make your money, and the last thing you want to do is implement something that's going to slow that process down. I mean, I think in some ways that's even more important to incentivize, than the deposit side, because that's going to help you break even the fastest from there.
For those who aren't familiar, Matt, can you just describe what that process looks like on the borrower side? Like, why does that generate the income?
Yeah, because if say I have Luna, I put up Luna as collateral, I borrow against that in UST, and Anchor receives interest on that loan. Okay, and then they're also able to stake Luna and earn rewards on Luna. So you've got interest on UST, you've got rewards from Luna, and we think that blended rate is somewhere closer to 10% versus 20%. And so if you adjust the if you adjust the the yield on the deposit side, and you're able to add more sources of collateral on the lending side, that income should increase pretty dramatically.
So how does this all get resolved? Like, what's the timeline here? Like, when does the vote happen? I think it's happening today, right?
It's happening now. There's been a lot of participation. I think we're ahead on number of votes cast in favor. We launched this yesterday. It's a 7-day process, and quorum needs to be reached for this to go live. We think that's going to be reached today. And yeah, we really want, just if your listeners or viewers are watching the show, I think this is a really great opportunity to participate in governance, and at least watch what happens. If you're staked, vote, and I think this could be a great outcome from everybody. Even this process, I think, has been good for Anchor and attention, and highlights how the community and token holders get involved can make positive change.
Matt, is there any sort of concern from the folks who are building this stuff, the folks at Anchor, that if you implement some sort of tokenomics proposal, that the actual dev side of things is quite complex versus just maybe changing like a rate or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard that kind of defense a lot. I think the reality is we've just gone to extreme lengths to confirm that any additional resources required to implement this are not going to be at the margin detrimental for Anchor. And this is these suggestions are pretty straightforward in terms of math and the linear taper on the yield, and we think from a smart contract basis, this can be definitely done.
Got it. Byron, Mike, you feel up to date?
That's it for me. I feel very up to. I'm digesting all of this. I'm digesting.
Mike, can I ask an inflammatory question?
Yeah, sure.
What's the difference between Luna and iron titanium?
And iron titanium.
Matt's like, get me off this podcast.
Go for
it. Because the tokenomics seem very similar, and I think the answer is that Luna is building this whole ecosystem of utility that iron titanium didn't have.
Yeah.
But it was the same burn and mint mechanism, right?
Yeah. I think we believe Terra is obviously just more sustainable business. And has shown that over the last 6 to 12 months in terms of just the the increase in adoption and TVL. It's been great. Thanks for having me on the podcast, having a platform to talk more about Anchor, and anyone out there, make sure you vote.
Matt, well, we appreciate the time.
All right.
Feel free to drop, and be well. All right, friends, quick break to share some exciting DeFi updates from Avalanche, which is one of the fastest and the most eco-friendly smart contract platforms out there. If you haven't been keeping up with the DeFi innovation on Avalanche, it is madness. There are new DeFi protocols launching on Avalanche on a daily basis. The ecosystem is getting pretty incredible. I thought I'd call out like 3 different projects that I'm keeping an eye on right now. The Platypus Wars are heating up on the new stable swap protocol. Dexalot is launching soon. They've got this unique price discovery mechanism and an on-chain limit order book. I think that's pretty interesting. And then also Trader Joe just launched a brand new set of tokenomics to participate in token launches, stablecoin farming, and governance tokens. Really, really interesting innovation coming out of the DeFi space on Avalanche. And then also just beyond DeFi innovation, there's a study I thought you guys might find interesting. The Crypto Carbon Ratings Institute assessed the carbon efficiency of 6 of the leading networks. They found that Avalanche consumes 35,000 times less energy than Ethereum and 200,000 times less than Bitcoin. Obviously, go do your own research. There's this study from the Crypto Carbon Ratings Institute, that is CCRI. You can go read it on your own. But if you guys want to build DeFi products, if you want to use DeFi and want to do it in an eco-friendly way, do it on Avalanche. Now, let's get back to the show.
One thing I would love to get, I mean, it sounded like Matt didn't really want to talk about it, but I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on just the LFG Foundation and this collateralization that they're doing with Bitcoin. in general. So I don't know if you saw this, but there's something pretty cool. Yeah, so there's very important, stablecoin pool on Curve, right? Which is, between the stables, right? So it's like UST, there's DAI, there's USDC, and the LFG Foundation, they tweeted out that there's been an imbalance in the pool, right? There's a huge demand for UST because the yield that you can get in the Anchor protocol, it's like 19%. Jason, you said the yield on every other stable is falling. So basically what LFG is going to do is they're going to burn, read swap, 4.2 million Luna, which is like $1.5 billion dollars. I'm pretty sure at the current value. They're going to mint that, so turn it into UST. They're going to sell it back into the pool, and then they're going to use those proceeds to buy basically $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin, which is pretty crazy. That's crazy to me on a bunch of levels. Like, one, that's just another sustainable source of demand for Bitcoin in general. Two, that's a $1.5 billion market buy, I think, for Bitcoin, which is pretty sizable. And it actually just reminds me, Jason, of this point that you made on your podcast with Jim Bianco last week or whenever it came out, which is decentralized stablecoins were going to be the ones that ultimately ended up winning. There's a number of reasons for that, but I thought it was very cool. I don't know if, Byron, you have any other takes there on that whole thing?
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about that. I mean, for one, the Luna that's being burned that's not Luna that's being bought in the market, right? That's just Luna that they printed themselves at zero, right?
That happens at the protocol level. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of the specifics, but the UST and Luna, you consider it like a swap. It's not like they're going onto an exchange and like Astroport or something like that and actually exchanging it.
Right. So that shouldn't be the reason why the Luna token price has gone crazy. So I'm still not totally clear on why it's been as good as it has been. And then also I feel like this relationship between LFG and Luna and UST it's just kind of antithetical to the spirit of crypto, right? Because it's not encoded in smart contracts. You don't really know what the collateral is for, or how it's going to be used, or when it's going to be used, or why it's going to be used. I don't know. It just seems kind of anti-crypto to me.
I think, to zoom out for a second, like there are two different models that people have for building stables or stable coins. You need two things. You need demand for your stable, and then you need reserve assets. So like Ohm, so you can kind of start with one or the other. And Ohm started with the reserves. So they had this kind of, I don't want to call it a scheme, but like kind of a scheme to accumulate like a whole bunch of reserves very quickly, which is basically, hey, park these reserves with us and we'll give you a bunch of this coin. It's going to be very inflationary, but people that got in early did extremely well. So they kind of started with the reserve, but I think the big problem is that they never actually found a source of demand for the coin that they were giving out. Terra was almost like the opposite, right? They started and they bootstrapped based on actual demand from payments in South Korea, Chai, right? So they kind of started with demand for UST, and now I think they're in the process of accumulating reserves to actually safely collateralize that system. I think people realize that the Luna system of that mint switch mechanism between Luna and UST is probably not everything that's not the end state, right? So I think they're working on getting other sources of collateral. And right now, part of that is like VCs pouring money into Terraform Labs, which is then stabilizing the yield reserve in Anchor. That's like part of it. And then part of it is just they're transforming some of the Luna and UST into more stable things like Bitcoin.
Right, but you would expect that for a collateralized stable coin that the collateral would be within the protocol, right? It just seems funny to me that it's outside of the protocol.
Yeah. I don't know.
And then was that, I don't think that was part of the original plan, was it? There wasn't an original roadmap that says we're going to add collateral at some point. So like, why are they adding collateral now? Like, it seems like everything's going great. Like it's it's got a huge market cap. It's outperforming everything. Like why are they adding collateral now?
I think that is the big question, isn't it? Was this always the plan, or was it not? And is this a pivot? I would guess it's a pivot, but I have no inside information. I would purely guess that it's a pivot, but I think it's a smart one, to be honest. And it gets to a high level thing. It's like everyone, the whole narrative, like everything in crypto for the whole time I've been in here has been, just wait until the institutions come in, right? Just wait. Wall of demand, all this stuff. Wait till central banks view Bitcoin like they do gold, and they'll buy it to hedge this deflating fiat system, etc. And basically, the whole time I've been in crypto, the trend that you could observe is fade that narrative, just fade it. And actually, the people that do best will like find crypto kind of bootstraps its own demand. And what's interesting to see is, to connect it to Jim Bianco's point on centralized one-to-one US dollar backed stablecoins versus the decentralized ones was that the regulators in the financial system are actually never going to allow the centralized ones to get big enough because they view them as money market funds, and they're really worried about essentially like a run on the fund, right? Because eventually people put money in, but then they want to take it out. So they're worried that people want to move their funds back into the fiat ecosystem. They're going to have to sell whatever like corporate debt or holdings that they have that's securing, right, the USDC, and there'll be a run. So the door is actually, so basically his theory is that there's a limit on how big those stable coins can get, but there's kind of no limit on decentralized algorithmic stable coins like UST. And what's really interesting is that they are essentially collateralizing it with digital gold, Bitcoin, and it looks more like, not exactly like, but more like a Bretton Woods semi-gold standard type system than the purely fiat one that we have now. So it's just interesting to see that kind of get replicated.
Is UST still an algo stablecoin if the collateral is outside of the algorithm?
I'm sure that I'm an idiot for asking this live, but why is that such a critical detail?
Well, isn't that the point of crypto is that everything is encoded in smart contracts, and you can read the smart contracts. Not that I can, but people can read the smart contracts and see exactly what's going to happen when whatever happens, right? But in this case, you're dependent on somebody at LFG making a decision to defend the peg at some point whenever they want to. Right?
My take on this is that everything in crypto has been a spectrum, right? And on one side of things, and like if you look at stable coins, the spectrum is on one side of things, you've got USDC where it's fully collateralized by things like very outside of the crypto system, like US dollars, right? And then on the other side of things, you have algorithmic stable coins where every single thing about the stable coin, including the algorithm, and like that's all in the smart contracts, that's all on chain. And what Terra is doing seems like what has been the successful model so far in crypto is to find some sort of middle ground, right? Where they're saying that DeFi and like this decentralized economy that we're building needs some sort of decentralized money, and that the decentralized money needs decentralized reserves. And that's where Bitcoin comes in, is to collateralize the UST with the Bitcoin. And I don't know, I actually don't have as big of a problem as you have with it, Byron, because I'd rather have some sort of middle ground than just like 50 more takes at an algorithmic stablecoin that I've seen blow. Those have blown up every single time. I mean, I'm waiting for those to prove me wrong, and hopefully we find one that's successful. And I know there are a lot of decentralized stables that are raising, but historically those have blown up every single time. And I think it's good to it's good to have some sort of pushing farther on the spectrum of decentralization than we have with some of the big stables right now, especially as we got like the executive order coming down. Obviously, the U.S. government is taking things really, really seriously right now with crypto. So
I think I think a lot of this depends on their path, right? What they view as the ultimate end state here. Because it seems like Bitcoin is going to be the primary sort of reserve asset of this new decentralized stablecoin. But I'd guess the next thing that they're going to is ETH, right? And other types of assets. It's almost like a basket of different types of reserves is what I would guess they're heading towards. But and you're right, Byron. I mean, there's not a lot of transparency into how that actually works from a governance standpoint and who defends the peg. And at the end of the day, from a first principle standpoint, it's not that different from the current system we have. I don't have those.
But if they're collateralizing it with other cryptos, and that is only actually really helpful in a scenario where Luna collapses, but no other cryptos do, right? If Luna is going down because all of the cryptos are going down, which is the most likely scenario, right? Then that's not that super helpful, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's impermanent. I think that those correlations will continue to break down over time. Like it doesn't make sense really from any first principle standpoint that Luna and Bitcoin's price be at least to me. I think if you put yourself in the shoes of, let's say you're approaching this of there's a whole bunch of different protocols doing a whole bunch of different things, right? There are sectors, and in this new crypto economy where there are different sectors, it would make sense that just like in the regular economy, there are safe haven assets like gold, and there are risk assets like Netflix. It would make sense to me that eventually the end state of this new crypto economy with different sectors, you have risk off assets like Bitcoin and risk on assets like I don't want to call Luna risk on asset, but you know what I'm talking about. So I think it's probably early days, and that end state is very little comfort, right? Because I'm sure there's an enormous amount of correlation between Bitcoin and Luna today, but I guess theoretically it wouldn't be like that in the future.
What about the VCs that are putting in the funding for these collateral buys? Are they just making a bet on Luna?
I'm actually not 100% sure how that works from their standpoint.
I thought it was interesting that, VCs would be funding collateral buys, because usually, you think of VCs as giving a company capital to develop a business, right? But they're giving them capital just to buy collateral, which is kind of interesting. I also thought that it was interesting that Jump, I think, was the headliner name of the VCs. So that made me think, I wonder if Jump is now like the Warren Buffett of crypto, because, because they rescued Solana. Now everyone is going to go to Jump. The Jump is going to have first look on every single deal, right? Because everyone wants to be associated with the Jump name.
Yeah, it was Jump in 3 arrows.
In which case, they're going to make back that whatever $300 million they spent or whatever on ETH. They're going to make that back very quickly.
Jump is the new Fed. That's the motto. Sorry to jump people listening. All right, let's jump forward here. No pun intended. God, that was horrible. All right. Executive order this week. Joe Biden. Biden's executive order. Let's talk about this. I think there was a lot of talk, and I think it'd be helpful to break it down here. First, I think it's important to just touch on what the executive order does and what this is. When I read executive order, it seems like some very high and powerful thing that was coming down with some immediate change, but that is not what that actually means. There's no real direct action that needs to be taken from this order yet, right? All this report did and this executive order did was basically lay out a series of processes and deadlines for what seems to be like an interagency team that is going to write a framework around crypto in these 6 very, very broad categories. The first one was protecting consumers. No surprise there, protecting consumers and investors. The second was protecting the US and global financial stability. Very interesting, something we can talk about there. Third is addressing illicit finance. Seems like this narrative is never going to go away. The fourth is reinforcing U.S. financial leadership. The fifth is access to safe and affordable financial services products. And the sixth is supporting technological advances. What are your guys' take? Did either of you have a chance to go through this exec order? Either of you guys have any takes here?
I read the executive summary of the executive order, which I think is more than most people have done.
I read the Twitter post of the executive summary of the executive order, so I feel good about that, Byron.
So derivatives in the age of social media.
Exactly.
But I think all you need to know is in the first couple of paragraphs of even just the executive summary. The first sentence of the second paragraph was about an opportunity to reinforce American leadership. And I think that's. You really didn't need you didn't need to read the rest of it. That's I think that tells you all you need to know.
Kind of positive opening paragraph, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was kind of like a pump me up.
Yeah,
$3 trillion asset class, enormous amount of adoption. I was like, all right, that's pretty cool. I'm sure they have to provide some sort of justification for why they're doing this, but I thought it was kind of
sounds like they outsourced it to Blockworks or something.
Yeah, exactly. New revenue stream right there. I had a similar take, Mike. I mean, Jeremy Allaire said it best, right? The executive order TLDR, this is as Jeremy said, a watershed moment for crypto and Web3. And as he explained it, as Jeremy is someone who built an internet business in the 90s and took it public in that first .com bubble, this is akin to the 1996, 1997 government wake up to the commercial internet. And I think that the executive order is just quite important, as it shows that our government is now taking what the three of us on this call or podcast probably believe to be true, is that the U.S. government is now waking up to the fact that digital assets, crypto, is one of the most significant technologies that we have over the next couple of decades, and that it's important that this industry gets built in the U.S. Instead of somewhere else. So,
I have another reason for why I think it's important. This is an analogy that gets way overused in crypto, but it's like the one with like people with blindfolds over their face and they're all touching an elephant, and someone touches the trunk and someone touches the leg and someone touches the torso. They all describe a different thing. So in the US, there are this patchwork of regulators on the federal level, on the state level. And I think there's been kind of jockeying because crypto is so many different things. There's been kind of, interagency competition about who gets what jurisdiction, right? This is definitely happening between the SEC and the CFTC. Honestly, probably a lot of Gensler's tough talk is him showing to folks in Washington that, see, I'm serious enough. I'll actually be tough and fair on this industry. I think he's just trying to expand the SEC's jurisdiction in crypto. But what was so interesting, what was cool for me about this executive order is basically a stamp of, first of all, probably nothing draconian is going to happen, right? This is a deadline for when we're actually going to get a serious framework for how to do this. And we're telling which agencies should tackle which parts of this, of the concerns that the United States have. So if you actually, so I actually went and read the executive order, shame on both of you, but they actually do designate toward which agency should be, focused on which acts, essentially. So I think it was actually kind of useful purely from a coordination standpoint about, okay, Treasury, you take this part, SEC, Chamber of Commerce, you take this part. So I thought it was just good from a purely coordination standpoint, who does what.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree. I mean, I think it's just this is now the biggest takeaway is that this is now a legitimate, serious, important part of the economy and society, and that they're now taking it seriously and assigning. Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mike, about they're actually assigning who's going to do what. So, yeah.
I had some other thoughts on it too. I thought there was
I have a thought, which is this is going to lead to, right now, without any regulation, brand building and company building is very fair. And again, this is just my take. Don't know anything about what's coming, but I think that what ends up happening is there's going to be a lot of regulation that gets put in place. That's a good thing for the industry, as it will I think kind of nullify a lot of the regulatory FUD. But the other thing that regulations oftentimes lead to are like king making. So you can quickly see a world where, like, let's take crypto exchanges. Every crypto exchange has been able to operate in the exact same way. And it's come down to, like, how fast can you build products and how quickly can you acquire users. There could be a world where US regulators almost king make like 5 or 6 or 7 of the exchanges. And those are the exchanges that are allowed to operate in the US, and no one else is allowed to operate in the US. And that would be, there are positive and actually negative ramifications from that. But you could see a world where other things start getting, like, king making starts happening, or they come down really heavily on something like DeFi, but let things like BlockFi happen. So
do you think we develop into a regulated industry and a not unregulated industry? One where you just log on and one where you log on with a VPN?
Kind of. I think the distinction right now is going to be between CeFi and DeFi. I think Matt Levine, your counterpart, Byron, has done a really good job of outlining this. And this is where I think it's kind of, so BlockFi, right? Anyone who has ever interacted with BlockFi knows how professional that operation is, right? They're really trying to do things by the book, and be regulated and interface with people, and they're not doing anything shady. So they just got hit with a $100 million fine from the SEC because they defined their interest-bearing accounts as an investment product. And I can kind of see that, but at the same time, there's all this other stuff. It's like they're trying to engage. They're trying to do things right and play by the book, but they're a regulatable entity because they're a company and they're engaging, and they get hit with this big fine. And then you have this thing over in, like, oh, we're like totally decentralized land, and we can just do whatever we want kind of with impunity. And at the end of the day, it's not that decentralized over in super decentralized land, right? That's a lot of the risk with a lot of these early stage I'm not ragging on anyone. It's just the reality of early stage projects. So I think it's less like VPN versus non-VPN and more the companies that try to be regulated and are more CeFi type companies and more Wild West DeFi companies. That's how I see the distinction being drawn, and I don't actually know what the eventual end state of that is, because you could see a world. Wow, stealing your phrase, Jason. You could see a world where the CeFi regulated stuff really dominates, but I could easily see a world too where the people that just flout the rules and take the Uber approach and say regulation will catch up to us end up getting huge and winning. So I don't know how it ends up playing out.
Here's the most interesting part for me is that it seems like the U.S. government is starting to understand that it needs to slow down on the regulation of stables or CBDC, some sort of U.S. dollar backed stablecoin, and allow the market to put U.S. dollar backed stablecoins in the hands of billions of people. I think that that they had a couple of things in there around like reinforcing U.S. financial leadership. That's, I mean, just their desire to protect the like superiority of the U.S. dollar, I think stands out as one of the as a way to get inside of how some of them are thinking about that. That's a more long-term take in my mind, that they're thinking about this. So that's interesting to see.
I wonder how much of that is a function of the current stuff in the Ukraine. Just, everyone's realized how much leverage we have via financial warfare.
100%. So the executive order that I think Biden signed yesterday laid out a deadline for 180 days, right, for a comprehensive framework to be delivered to him, except on the illicit financing part, which is 90 days. So that was actually expedited, and I'm sure that had to do with political pressure from the war in Ukraine and everything. So actually, on some of I had some like specific pros and cons, like things that I thought were very bullish and maybe some things that were a bit more worrisome. So I thought on the bullish side, I thought it was really good actually that they called out, they wanted to promote U.S. leadership in technology and economic competitiveness. That's their exact word. I thought that was the most kind of optimistic and promising part of the whole thing. They did specifically call out CBDCs in general. I didn't really know what to think about that. So they explicitly called on the Fed to begin investigating that. I think they already had been investigating it, but now it's part of an executive order, so I guess it's just that much more official. They also had a very specific phrase, which was kind of buried in there, which is this idea about sovereign money is at the core of a well-functioning financial system, macroeconomic stabilization policies, and economic growth. That's kind of buried in some of the fine print. So that idea, I think, has not changed, right? That they view a sovereign form of money as being a solution to a lot of woes. And I mean, I did this interview. I don't think it won't have aired by the time this airs, but I do wonder if sanctions are actually as good as everyone thinks they are. Like, oh, this is this new evolved 21st century form of warfare, and by starving people out, that's somehow going to limit the amount of killing and violence. And I think it could exacerbate things and make people more desperate. But yeah, I think some of those core ethos problems between crypto as a neutral payments infrastructure, and I'm not sure that was 100%. I think some of those, this executive order and some of the wording kind of laid bare the ideological inconsistencies by how the U.S. is approaching it versus how crypto is approaching it.
Are CBDCs good for the crypto industry? I'm not sure if I'm rooting for or against that.
I think you can make a compelling use case.
Rooting against it, I would say. I'm rooting against them. I don't, because they're not it's not crypto. It's not built. It's not going to be built on Ethereum's rails. It's just going to be a digital currency. I think they'll call it a CBDC, but they're not going to build it on like ETH's rails or any sort of. I don't know why. I don't know what the argument for. It's not going to integrate into DeFi protocols. Like, I don't know what the argument for being pro CBDC.
Why would it not integrate? I assume that it would do.
Because it's not built on crypto rails. Like USDC is built on USDC and like Tether. Like,
yeah, I mean USDC is on like every blockchain, right? Why would a US CBDC not be also on every blockchain?
I would guess it's because, I mean, this goes all the way back to this super old debate, like public versus private blockchains. I assume for security concerns, they would want to have a limited set of nodes or validators or whatever in that system. So I think for all intents and purposes, it would be like this adjacent blockchain that might be interoperable. But I actually view it as like, I think if we ever got a CBDC, it would just exacerbate all the problems that we currently have with money. You know, I mean, they would definitely look at it as a way to cross the zero lower bound and have even more direct monetary control, which I think crypto kind of says is a problem. So the way I interpreted your question there, Byron, was actually, I think it could actually make some of our problems with the money system worse and hasten the adoption of an alternative. But I think that process would be messy. So that's why I'm not sure if I'm voting for it or against it. But I don't know.
I feel like if it was a CBDC that was issued by commercial banks in the same way that commercial banks print money. I feel like that would that not just mainstream DeFi and crypto and in a way that would be good for the industry?
But how in that scenario, like commercial banks lend that money into existence, right? How would that work in a distributed ledger ecosystem? I think because that would have to be baked into some sort of inflation or issuance schedule, right? I don't understand how the system would work the same.
A bank could just print the CBDC in the same way that they print dollars.
Yeah, I think that kind of undermines the point of what most people see though about digital money, which is that it's a transparent monetary policy.
Wouldn't it just? But that would just be Tether backed by the U.S. government, no?
But again, the problem is the backed by the U.S. government. Then again, just from first principle, then how is it much different from the? I think the problem that most people have with the current system is the ability to create or expand or contract the money supply at will. And I think in this system, you've just got an upgraded infrastructure, but it's the same. It's the same thing, right? It's a limited set of validators. It's theoretically more transparent, but nobody really knows because it would be really expensive. If you view like a bank as in this scenario that we're talking about here, a bank is kind of the same thing as a Bitcoin node, right? Because the banks are the ones that have the transparency into the light. It's very expensive, obviously, to have a bank. I feel like we're getting into the weeds here. I don't know, but my interpretation of a CBDC is that would be it would be antithetical. I think it would not. Yeah, don't think it would work. But it looks like they might create one. So.
All right, I'm moving us forward. Andre and Anton are closing down all of their, they're not closing down their crypto businesses, but they're stepping away. Andre obviously is I think it's fair to call him one of the godfathers of DeFi. And Andre and his partner are leaving the DeFi space and are just kind of walking away. And I think a lot of people said, rug pull. I don't think this is a big rug pull. I want to get your guys' thoughts, but first I'm going to kind of give a little bit of a background on like what happened here and who are on Andre and Anton. I think it's just important to understand like how much they've actually built in DeFi. Yearn Finance, Keeper Network, multi-chain .xyz, Chainlist, Solidly. They built the like bribe.crv.finance platform, and I think it's just like Andre, for those who know, Andre is like this serial introvert, I would call him. And he's just a serial like gigabrain who just loves to build. And I think probably there's this guy, the DeFi Edge on Twitter, who had this nice breakdown of this. I think the turning point for Andre came when they announced the VE 3 of 3 project that we've been talking a lot on the podcast. And basically it was like Andre was going to build, right? And Danny Sesta was going to handle the marketing and build hype. And this was this like DeFi match made in heaven. But then obviously in January you had Sifu, the whole Sifu gate thing came out, and Zach XBT shared that 0x Sifu was the co-founder of Quadriga X, and that whole thing came down, and Danny's reputation took this huge hit. And so then Danny had to step away from VE 3 of 3 and other projects to just focus on maintaining Wonderland. And that just left Andre to handle his new like, it was like all caps, like solid project, right? And Andre's my take on him is he's this like gigabrain developer who likes building behind the scenes, but now he was the face of the project and he had to handle marketing and PR and all that kind of stuff. And what happened is they launched the Solidly exchange, and like it didn't go super well. There were like bugs and there's confusion and people weren't happy with the UI, and the whales were doing their stuff. And now you had Andre, who likes to be behind the scenes. He now had to handle all of this stuff, and you could start to see him getting fed up, I think. And he posted on Twitter that he'd only shit post from here on out, and he would just share memes all day. And then he deactivated his Twitter. And then, what was this? It's March 10th today. So like March 5th or March 6th, Andre or his partner, Anton, dropped this bomb that they were leaving the DeFi space. And obviously the implications have been pretty big so far. Like Phantom's price dropped, I think 15-20% in like 24 hours, and a lot of other implications. But I'll pause there. Do you guys have any quick thoughts on this, or not quick thoughts?
My primary thought was just it's just incredible how like $5 billion of TVL went into Phantom on that Solid project before it was even launched. It's pure tokenomics with no utility. It's just an airdrop, and that managed to attract $5 billion into Phantom. So like where does that $5 billion come from? And then it just did a complete U-turn and came straight back out when on the Andre news, which is just amazing to me. Like, do these people know what they're buying? Like, I feel like this goes back to my theme of tokens are not stocks. Like people buy these things like Solid, which you couldn't even buy. They bought all of the other things because they were going to get airdrop Solid. And I just wonder, like, do they really know the game that they're playing? If so, that's great. I mean, have fun. But I just the scale of the in and outflows is just amazing to me.
I have two takes on this. One, did anyone notice the actual way that people found out about this was that Andre updated his LinkedIn? I thought that was so funny. Nobody's talked about that. He just updated his LinkedIn. Everyone saw it. It was like, he's got to be the only guy in crypto that uses LinkedIn, which I think is really
very, very boomer.
I think that's so funny.
I think that's a huge troll.
No, anyway, actually, the way I was looking at kind of Phantom is like Phantom, I think, arrived at kind of the end of the biggest trend of the 2020 to 2021 bull run, which was alternative L1s. And I think there were a lot of like very successful L1s. I'm definitely a believer in a multi-chain future, but I think probably the long tail of L1s got a little bit long. And I think that what made Phantom so attractive was that you had this EVM compatible alternative L1. It had some cool branding and stuff like that, but it had this huge embedded option in the form of this Andre Danny team. And they were building like madmen on top of this thing. And I think there are pretty recent examples of where you saw how one ecosystem participant, a giant one, like a Sam Bankman-Fried or a 3 Arrows Capital, could essentially make a chain. And this is different because it's not a multi-billion-dollar bidder, it's a builder, but arguably a builder is even more valuable than a multi-billion-dollar bidder. So I think people just saw it as this huge option. And then essentially that option expired and people found out it was worthless and the whole value of the protocol went down 25%. It actually feels kind of logical to me. And this isn't to say, Phantom, their account tweeted this out, which is, look, we've got a 40-person full-time team. Andre has not been a core developer, a core contributor to Phantom. There's a lot more going on here than just Andre, and I think that's totally fair and true. But I think a lot of people saw what Andre had done in the past with Yearn. They saw Frog Nation with Danny, and they were like, wow, this is a really powerful force, and him leaving, it just made it that, not to say it won't be successful, but I think it just made it that much less attractive. That's my take.
Do you guys think he is, do you think that he is burned out? Or do you think that this is regulatory psyops and he will come back as an anon dev and keep building? My take is that he's just burned out. And he has no interest in going on Twitter every day. And
I do think there's a good regulatory angle to it. Is that you've got some cases to point to, and as to what's decentralized and what's not decentralized. I think you can look at the token price of Yearn, and when Andre quits, it doesn't move. I think that's evidence that is decentralized enough to maybe not be a security according to the Howey test. But all of the brand new tokens that went to zero, those clearly were dependent on one person, and therefore do pass the Howey test and are securities.
Just for folks who might not be what part of the Howey test are you referring to there, Byron? Byron,
it's the very last one that says that the expectation of profitability is dependent on the efforts of others. Which is like how if you invest in a company, you're dependent on the management of that company to do a good job, so that they make profits and you make a return. If there's something similar in crypto, then that's going to be deemed a security, which would have been the case like in with Wonderland Time, the the guy that got outed kept on being referred to as the CFO of Wonderland Time. Like that just like was just a massive red flag. Anything that has a CFO is clearly a security. But in this case, the most prominent guy associated with Yearn quit and nothing happened to the token price or the protocol, which is good evidence that it's not a security.
I think it's I think also this is just classic bear market stuff, I think. Yeah. I just think people,
I was going to say the same thing.
I think overall the industry feels, if I had to characterize it with one word, it's probably just a little tired in general. I mean, it's been a sprint for the last 2 years, and emotions ran high. People thought they had more money than they had. It's just like all the classic stuff. And I think this kind of hit home for me because I genuinely just do believe the guy is tired, and it's like, do I really want to go through this slog right now? I just think this is the kind of classic thing that happens in a bear market.
I'm not sure about the bull market, bear market take, because I mean, if a solid airdrop could attract $5 billion of TVL in a couple of weeks, that's not very bear market, right? That's pretty bull market still.
But how long ago did that happen?
I was only a month ago or something, or I don't know.
Maybe a little less. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was like right at the end of last year. I think
maybe it was a couple of months. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a different time, and there was another big botch. I don't know if you guys followed the EVMOS. So I won't get into too many details, but that was another kind of like, within the Cosmos ecosystem, that was another kind of L1 that was going to launch, and it had a lot of fanfare, and there was a lot of reasons why it was attractive, and they're kind of doing something interesting with their emission schedule, and they're rewarding more users and developers, and it was going to be EVM compatible. There were all these reasons why it was kind of a hyped up, exciting chain, and it launched, and they actually, pretty ironically now, they had this thing called a wrecked drop, it was supposed to be called that because everyone had just gotten wrecked, and it was trying to reward people who were participating in the ecosystem and got wrecked and like make them whole. The irony is that they kind of messed up the airdrop. A whole bunch of people weren't allowed to participate. So like a very, very select few people did get to participate. They got outsized rewards. Then there was a security patch that they needed to patch through, and validators ended up double signing. The whole chain had to get paused. And now they're in this scenario of, do we restart the chain essentially from right before the mess up, or do we restart from the beginning? And it's just a whole cluster. And it's like, oh God, I really feel for the team. Like, I think it was best intentions, but again, this is not scientific at all. But for me, I think it kind of marks the end. I think this is just all marking the end of the L1 phase.
I mean, Haseeb and Avichal talked about this. It's like there's just narrative exhaustion, right? Last 18 months, every 2 to 3 weeks, there was a new narrative. There's a new exciting thing. And now it's like, I don't know, what are the big things that have happened recently? Like, I mean, DeFi feels pretty dead. You've got like the Sifu scandal, the wormhole exploit, NFT rugs left and right. Solid kind of was botched in the Phantom network. Andre and Anton are packing their bags. You've got this thing, EVMOS, that I haven't really been following. Like this other smart contract that just seems like it fell on their face. Like, yeah, I'm also getting bear market vibes.
Byron's trader for 30 years. Byron's never seen a bear market.
Byron's still Byron? Byron's never seen a real bear market.
Stir the pot.
I'm just trying to rile him up,
Yeah, I feel like I missed out on the layer one lottery ticket age, and I wonder if there's ever going to be anything as good as that in crypto again.
Layer 2s. Just wait till these layer 2s launch tokens.
They don't even have tokens.
They will.
They will. Yeah.
They're not gonna go from 10 cents to $200, are they?
I don't know. Yeah. Let's wrap it.
Let's wrap it up. Let's wrap this before we say something that we're not supposed to say on a podcast. Byron, I feel you wanting to jump through. I know you have seen some bear markets.
I'm not.
It's going to be okay.
I'm not sure. I don't know. What is crypto's market cap now? 1.7 trillion. That could go to zero, and it would not be 2008 or 2000. So.
Disc. Sean.
Disc.
I can only imagine, but I really don't.
Yeah. All right, guys. This has been a fun one. Thanks to the
Jason,
Matt.
how do we do filling in for Santiago here? Where do we rate on the scale?
Like a 6 out of 10, I'd say. Probably.
That's pretty good.
Next
I'll
time
take
he's
that.
going to be tweeting Elon Musk and getting him to send some internet satellites to Africa. Quick, ship some satellites. Get some satellites in the air over Togo or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Meanwhile, Santiago's enjoying his like safari or wherever he is these days. So, Santiago, we want you back, my friend. Byron and Mike, you were decent sub-ins. Thanks for joining, guys. Thanks for listening. Join the Discord. Drop your questions in the Empire Discord channel, and we will see you next week.
Yes.